Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Writing Tip Tuesday. I'm Sammy, and I'm a writer who likes to help other writers become better writers. With Nanowrimo going on and people just generally changing up their writing routines and becoming a bit more aggressive with their word count goals in their writing sessions, I wanted to talk about some ways that outside of Nanowrimo and perhaps even inside of it, you can remain productive on your story developing process and your writing process without killing yourself over the word count. I want to dive into different ways that your writing session can be productive and the point at which those helpful aspects of a writing session are no longer productive. In general, what makes a writing session productive is very different depending on each individual writer. There is the status of the project, if it's still in like outlining, idea development phase, if it's in the writing phase, if it's in the editing phase, if it's in other phases that come in between or after those. That's gonna lead to a different level of productivity being what is effective for that project. Whatever your goals are for that specific project. So like, for example, during Nano, your goal is to hit 50,000 words by the end of the month. So you're gonna have a set word count goal every day to make that happen. Whereas if you're planning to write a first draft of a book in like 3 or 4 months, your word count is gonna be a little bit less structured for that time span. And depending on how much time you have in the day to dedicate to writing, your sessions are gonna look different. And that is all something that you have to take into consideration before you start comparing yourself to other people or feeling bad that you're not hitting certain word count goals. There's a lot of different things that go into a productive session. And some of those productive sessions are not going to involve writing words for your project. Basing your productivity in a writing session on word count alone can be very damaging to your mental health and your creative ability because it's not all there is. There's a lot of different things that go into getting that word count out. And if you don't feel confident in your characters, in your story, in your mood while writing. Not that your mood should always influence your writing, but if you haven't eaten, maybe prioritize that so you're not writing while hungry and getting stuck because your brain isn't working, you know? There's a lot of different aspects that can lead into word count not being the best way to measure your productivity. I think as long as you are making progress on your story and you are not procrastinating on it, that is considered productive. So continuing forward with the knowledge that everyone's productivity is going to be different and you should not base yours off of what other people are doing or word count alone, let's talk about how a writing session can be productive for the progress of your story without relying solely on word count. Some examples of things that I think can be productive to a certain level, depending on what status your writing project is at, include making Pinterest boards, making playlists of music for your writing sessions, for your characters, for the vibes of those things, doing some outside character development, thinking about your character's past and how their past will impact their future going through the story, outlining or storyboarding your plot, thinking of major landmarks of your story and how your characters can get to them, and reading. But knowing when these are actually being useful and moving you forward on your story versus being something that you're doing instead of writing because of whatever reason that you feel you need to procrastinate. So let's go into each of those individually. We'll start with Pinterest boards. Pinterest boards can be super helpful for gathering enough visual information to be able to pull from rather than having to create everything in your mind. So what the world looks like, what the aesthetics are of the places that your characters are going, what your characters dress like, how your characters interact with the physical things around them. Like a sci-fi is gonna have different aspects than a historical fiction, and having the ability to look at images of things that may relate to what you are imagining can make it easier to imagine more effectively and therefore write those things more effectively. Be able to look, okay, we're in this location, I've got a Pinterest board for that location. So like, let's say a factory, I've got a Pinterest board for what goes on in this factory. These are all things that I can reference. You pull up that Pinterest board, you have it on one side of your screen to look at while you're writing on the other side of your screen, and now you've got a productive workspace because you took the time to make that Pinterest board to have something to reference for the aesthetics of that place. While these can be very effective for some people who are more visual and less internally creative on those visual aspects of describing things that come in storytelling, if you decide to start every hour-long writing session with 30 minutes of organizing, adding to, and reorganizing your Pinterest boards, that then becomes a procrastination. You're then avoiding the writing session. If you find that this is an issue for you or you fiddle around with it too much, maybe try printing it off, either on a home printer where things aren't going to be as bright and vibrant, or sending it off to like an Office Depot or Staples, some kind of store that does printing, and getting a printed copy to hang in your writing space rather than having it virtually accessible to move around and maneuver. That may be beneficial to you because you'll still get the benefit of having made the Pinterest boards and being able to reference the Pinterest boards without having the added want and accessibility to move around and adjust and spend time doing that. It's really recognizing the point that you are putting off the writing session to do the support for the writing session and taking the steps to avoid that while still getting the resources that come from doing the work of making a Pinterest board. And on to playlists. Making writing playlists can be super, super helpful. Music has a really interesting way of digging into your brain, and if you have a song that you always start writing to, whether it's instrumental or a movie score or just like a general pop song that you really enjoy, that puts you in the mood for writing, that you just regularly use to trigger yourself to get into the mood for writing, that can be super helpful because it'll take away some of that time that you take mental preparation to get into the writing mood for. But if you have that trigger that's always going to work and always there to be effective, you can just listen to it and then you're good. There's also the benefit of having music that relates to a certain character. If you're changing perspectives, I've heard that if you have different music genres, like if one character is like classical violin music and the other character is like electric rock, and they are very different, and it helps you switch that perspective a little bit easier, that is something that can be done with that way that music affects your mental space. Or even setting the scene for a scene that you're writing, getting the mood right for the scene that you're writing. The way that a movie score will tell a viewer what's coming is going to be threatening by like increasing the pace of the music, or something is going to be suspenseful by putting in suspense music. You have the opportunity to choose something like that, maybe a movie score or some other music that you feel like matches the vibe that you're going for, and play that while you're writing. But if you spend all of your time, similar to the Pinterest boards, curating these playlists with individual songs that you associate with things, and then coming up with a 7-hour long playlist that you then have to like cycle through and choose each individual song based on what you're writing in that moment, you are now taking more time to find a song than you are listening to the song and writing the scene. It may be beneficial to have a set, this is my writing playlist, these are the music that I listen to when I'm writing, and have it be something a little bit more neutral, or have like a genre associated, like the classical versus electric rock for that character's perspective. And then you can just put on like general playlists. Like Spotify has a bunch of playlists. You can find a classical violin playlist really easy, and then electric rock, you could find another playlist really easy, and just have that genre be the thing. Because if you spend so much time choosing individual songs, that's time that you're losing for writing in the time that you have allotted yourself for writing. That's really what makes something productive, is that you are capable of doing more of it in a certain period of time. And maybe taking the time to figure out, this is going to be my writing song, this is a song that I'm going to listen to when I want to get into the mood for writing, and then setting that on a loop at the beginning of your writing session, finding those a few songs that you are capable of listening to on a repeat that can associate with a character, so you don't have to choose multiple songs or listen to multiple songs, or have that distraction of like new music playing if you are choosing a playlist that you don't know. Choosing a few songs that can be repeated and just listen to on repeat may make that more effective, while still giving you the aspect of having that auditory release of having music playing while you're writing. So character development also feels like it is writing, but it's not always, because not a lot of the work that you put into character development will end up actually showing up in your story. You have to know where your character is from, who they are, why they are the way that they are, to push them to where they are going, to put them into challenging positions where their background is going to relate directly to what they have become, the grand scheme of things, how they will relate different things to different experiences that they've had, and the things that make them human are often going to be behind where the story starts. But But you don't have to know everything that has happened to them, and you will discover some things that like, hey, maybe if they had this experience in the past, this scene would be more impactful. So let's add that in because you have pushed them forward enough to be able to add something to their past, but knowing their past is gonna help you get started rolling, right? You should be paying attention exclusively to the things that you know are going to directly relate to things that you want to have happen in your story. Backgrounds that will affect how they act in their regular life during the story that you know XYZ is gonna happen. At some point, this is gonna happen and that'll relate to this. So you gotta figure out those things that actually connect with what's happening in the story. Think about it. You don't remember every single thing that's ever happened to you in your life, so why would you need to know everything that's happened to your character in theirs just to be able to get them through the story? If you spend too much time digging into their backgrounds, you're not going to be able to move them forward because you're going to be so stuck in the past. Bonus tip, if you're like me and names are really hard, give them placeholder names until you know them well enough that you're like, oh, okay, that name doesn't fit. We're gonna try a different one and move on from there. Take enough time that you know how they would react to certain things that you want to put them through, and then start putting them through things and see, well, I don't know why they would relate to that, and then go back. Don't start exclusively with everything figured out. After a while, if you keep going backwards, you're not moving forwards. And by not moving forwards, you're not being productive to your writing session. So let's talk about outlining and like hitting those plot points. You can figure out major events that you want to get your characters to, but you're not always going to be able to figure out every single thing that's going to happen. In some cases, if you do figure out every single thing that happens, why bother writing the story anymore? If you've already experienced everything as the writer who's telling the story, like what's going to keep you wanting to write it if you know everything that's gonna happen? And that's like a perspective that comes from pantsers, that they were like, I don't want to write anything that's been outlined. I don't want to do it. But even people who like to outline, people who really enjoy plotting the points and figuring out how things are gonna go, where things can intertwine and all of those kinds of things, having the opportunity to explore with your characters and let them breathe in the space is gonna lead to having more natural things come up and getting to know your characters better in the moment as well. I think if you're spending so much time outlining something and you haven't even gotten to that scene to figure out why you need to fit in all of these pieces, it's not gonna be super helpful. But if you are in a scene that you're writing and you're like, I don't know why this isn't working, I need to get them from point A to point B, but something's missing, maybe taking the time to step back from writing the scene to outline a little bit more and figure out, okay, so if this happens, then this can happen. And if that happens, then maybe we can get to point B, and then seeing how that works out. But knowing major events like, hey, they're gonna have a fight at this place, they have to get to this place, so they have to figure out how to get there and find that magical item so they can win that fight. So that's an event that I know is gonna happen. And then by winning that fight, they're gonna bring this guy who's a bad guy against them. And then that's gonna lead to this. Big plot points are really helpful to keeping your story on a track. But knowing every single tiny detail, like they're gonna take 3 steps before they hit the counter. And then when they hit the counter, they're gonna talk to the bartender, and the bartender is gonna tell them just enough information that they need to know to go north, and then they're gonna go north. It's a little bit too much, and it might be better to just write that scene rather than outline it in bullet points. And reading. My last video was on how reading and critiquing other people's writings will help you grow as a writer, so you can take a look at that. Reading is super beneficial to learning more about the craft of writing, and it can help you in the writing process to overcome challenges that you didn't know how to overcome on your own without having someone else's writing to reference. Now, there is a point where if you are just reading and you are not writing, that is no longer effective and it's not helpful to you becoming a better writer because you are not putting anything into practice and it is just procrastination. And that is a problem. Making sure that you are taking time to read as a practice for your writing rather than in the stead of your writing. That'll give you the opportunity to learn more about your craft and better your craft while you're in the process of doing it. And it might be helpful while you are in the editing process more than during the creation process, because if you're reading something similar to what your story is, you may accidentally subconsciously take things that happened in a book that you're reading and place them into your own. Being mindful of if you are writing and if you are actually working on your own project while reading, that makes reading making a productive part of your writing routine. I would, however, try to refrain from reading during the time allotted for your writing session. I don't know, it feels like it's really easy to get sucked into somebody else's story and then not want to go back to your own. And it could lead to an experience of imposter syndrome where there's a book that's doing better than you because it's already been published and you're still on your first draft. So keeping them separate but still thinking about them in tandem might be helpful. That is all that I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please leave a like. It'll really help me out and let YouTube know that maybe somebody else would also enjoy or learn something from this video. What is your vice? The thing that you know is not being productive for writing, but you want to do it anyway and claim that you're writing? Tell me about that in the comments. I'm so curious. Did I talk about it in this video? Because I feel like these are the ones that I hear the most often, but they might not be yours specifically. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I'm here every Tuesday and Saturday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Story Study Saturdays, so I will see you guys on Saturday.